Merit Janow is a close collaborator of mine. She was the reason when I moved to New York, I decided to join the SIPA faculty, along with the fact that Jay, another close associate, is up at that school at the school here now with both with me today. But I've had an opportunity to work with Merit and Jay on the program at SIPA and with Merit across a number of activities. She's a real leader in this space, but many spaces, and has a distinguished background in law and is an expert in trade and investment. She's had U.S. government service as the U.S. trade representative to Japan and China, corporate leadership, including currently being the chair of the MasterCard board, and was the dean here at SIPA until very recently. So Merit, thanks for your continued, sort of engagement with this program, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Greg, and good morning, good evening to all, and thank all of the participants. It's a real pleasure to moderate what feels to me a very timely and important conversation, and I want to congratulate Greg for organizing these series of dialogues, and together with Jay, I think what you have done to really engage the world through SIPA on cyber policy issues, very important to us, and I thank you. So it is a time of, substantial global disruptions, economic, geopolitical, technological, and obviously great heightened tension in the Asia-Pacific region, particularly the Taiwan Straits. And in this environment, Japan has always felt it lived in a dangerous neighborhood. But in this changed environment, Japan has made some significant changes in defense spending and is in its digital strategy and in its approach to cyber readiness. And of course, the relationship between the United States and Japan, I think, could not be closer. And it's an area of ongoing engagement and discussion. So I think this dialogue is very timely and important, and I'm very grateful to have extraordinary experts with us today. I think we'll start with opening remarks, each for 10 minutes or so, but starting with Dr. Watanabe, who was, of course, the first commissioner of the Acquisition Technology and Logistics Agency, which was established in 2015. He's had a number of important positions at the Ministry of Defense, both from a technology perspective and a policy perspective. He's a graduate of the National Institute for Policy Studies and has had many visiting professorships. So we'll start with Dr. Watanabe. Very grateful to have you. Thank you so much. Followed by Admiral Dennis Blair, who we know and deeply appreciate at SIPA. Thank you for collaborating with us, Admiral Blair, on many fronts. And he served as the Director of National Intelligence, which is, really the key officer leading our national intelligence agencies. With a long, extraordinary career in the Navy, and served as commander of the Chief of the Pacific Command, and has had a number of visiting professorships and chairs in national security and public policy. So thank you, Admiral Blair. And followed by remarks from Dr. Kanehara, professor at the Faculty of Law, Doshisha, and the inaugural Deputy Secretary General of the National Security Secretariat. So thank you, Dr. Kanehara, as well. I think each will speak for 10 minutes, but I know that Dr. Watanabe is going to give us a very big perspective on Japan's priorities, and then invite comments and exchange. And we will leave some time for questions, so please feel free to send them in via the chat function, and we'll turn to them at a certain point in our program. So without further delay, let me thank you again and hand this over to Dr. Watanabe.
Thank you. Good morning and good evening, everyone. My name is Hideaki Watanabe. I'd like to start my my conversation. Yeah, and I'd like to share my screen with you. Is this all right? I'm going to speak on cyber attacks on critical infrastructures and protection from them. This is my outline of my talk, and the first one is cyber attack and major blackout. If war was to break out in Japan in the future, which might be triggered by a possible crisis such as in Taiwan, it's not likely to start with an armed attack, but with a cyber attack on critical infrastructure. Cyber attacks might cause major power outages in Tokyo, as happened when Russia launched cyber attacks against Ukraine in 2014, causing a major blackout for weeks. A major blackout in Tokyo might bring Japan's economic activities to a halt, and if prolonged, bring the lives of the people to a standstill. In addition, it could cause companies and banks to go bankrupt and society to descend into chaos. This situation would leave Japan's self-defense force with its hands full, supporting the lives of the people rather than defending the nation. Next, cyber intelligence and active cyber defense. Therefore, critical infrastructure must be protected at all costs. In such cases, having prior information on attacks on critical infrastructure will greatly improve their ability to cope with the threats. At the end of last year, Japan formulated 3 security-related documents, which finally enabled Japan to implement active cyber defense in order to appropriately respond to future security issues. These documents state that before Japan suffers from a serious cyber attack, Japan will penetrate the enemy's network to prevent Japan from being attacked. Next, this is the main document of 3 document. The national security strategy. Let me give you a little more information in detail in this document. Japan will introduce concerning active cyber defense. Japan will introduce active cyber defense for eliminating in advance the possibility of serious cyber attacks that may cause national security concerns. And it is the first time to state active cyber defense, the word active cyber defense, in government's policy document. Then, concerning how to conduct active cyber defense, NSS state that for serious cyber attacks that pose security concerns against government, critical infrastructures, and others, the government will be given the necessary authority that allows it to penetrate and neutralize attacker servers in advance to extent possible. And then NSS also described the cyber intelligence related matter as follows. Furthermore, the government will continue to work for the enhancement of information gathering and analysis, attribution, and its public announcement, as well as formulation of international frameworks and rules in a coordinated manner with its allies, like-minded countries and others. Next is Admiral Blair's contribution to creating cyber defense policy of Japan. The NSS drastically changed, as I said. NSS this one, Admiral Blair, yeah. NSS drastically changed Japan's cybersecurity policy, including after active cyber defense and cyber intelligence. I suppose it is not well known that this policy change can be attributed to Admiral Blair's efforts. In April of last year, Admiral Blair came to Japan and attended LDP, Liberal Democratic Party's Security Research Committee, chaired by former Defense Minister Mr. Onodera as a lecturer, and in the presence of many LDP members, including several former defense ministers. He clearly and concretely explained the necessity of new cybersecurity policy. The objective of the research committee was to listen to experts' opinions on security matters, including cybersecurity, before creating national security strategy. Therefore, his presentation was very effective and timely for governments creating NSS. He stated that Japan should, Japan should increase capabilities of cyber defense, including cyber intelligence. Next, I'm going to talk about the next importance of cyber intelligence. So, Admiral Blair also strengthened that it is common knowledge in the intelligence communities in the Five Eyes countries that the partnership is established on the basis of give and take. They exchange the intelligence information on a daily basis. So, therefore, countries, including Japan, cannot supply intelligence information to the US, cannot share any intelligence information with the US. However, of course, in the case of that Japan is in grave condition, the US will surely provide the necessary intelligence information. He wanted to insist that the intelligence information exchange on a daily basis is very, very important, and it would surely increase Japan's preparedness to various risks, including cyber attack, and prevent Japan from falling into a grave condition. Next, I'd like to introduce Professor Tezuka's report. According to Professor Tezuka of Keio University, I think the sole Japanese authority in this field, research on cyber intelligence system will require at least 2 to 3 years, and a full-scale operation will take 1 to 2 years thereafter. He added that it is no exaggeration to say cyber intelligence is necessary for the purpose of accurately responding to the possible Taiwan crisis. However, given the prediction that crisis is likely to occur within 3 to 4 years, research on cyber intelligence system must begin now, or it will not be ready in time. The time has come for Professor Tezuka to begin his research. The next one, is the U.S. firms led by Dr. Greg Rattray, protect Ukraine's infrastructure. Prior to last year's February Russian military invasion of Ukraine, cyber attacks on Ukrainian public and private institutions accelerated in number and intensity. Two former U.S. government officials and leading experts on cybersecurity, Dr. Greg Rattray and Mr. Matthew Murray, have been working to help Ukraine create the nation's first national cybersecurity strategy. After the invasion took place, Dr. Rattray worked with the U.S. cybersecurity firms, including Avast, the Cyber Threat Alliance, Looking Glass, Cyber Solutions, Mandiant, and others to help Ukraine protect their critical infrastructures against Russian cyber attacks in a time of war. And they formed CDAC, what they called Cyber Defense Assistance Collaboration. It may not be well known to the public, but it is very important to note that Ukraine's critical infrastructure is now functioning thanks to the support of top-notch cyber defense firms led by Dr. Rattray. And in conclusion, as far as cyber intelligence is concerned, Japan needs to establish a cyber intelligence system and share information with the US. And Japan's critical infrastructure providers needs to upgrade their cyber countermeasures before the possible Taiwan crisis. It is also important to create a supportive environment for private firms in the US to operate in Japan. Japan needs the US companies' support to protect critical infrastructure. In order to receive their support, it is necessary to start concrete discussions with them. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Watanabe. You've mentioned many things that will be important for us to follow up on and engage. Let me now invite Admiral Blair. As you have been a leader in this field, let me just note you are on mute. And you've also been referenced here as having been quite a catalyst in discussions within Japan on what Japan might think about. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dean Janow. It's good to be here with so many friends and those interested in cybersecurity. I do have to correct Dr. Watanabe's statement a little bit. The work that I did with friends in Japan was very much a collaborative project with people like Dr. Watanabe, Dr. Kanehara, Dr. Tezuka, others in Japan. I think we have a unique group of US-Japan supporters who are experienced in national security, who care about this alliance, and it is very much a group effort in improving all aspects of the security relationship on both sides, and I'm proud to have been a part of it. Let me first talk about some of the good news in cybersecurity in recent months, some of the bad news, and then a little bit about the American National Cybersecurity Strategy, which was just released a month ago, which we will have a longer session about as part of this program. So first, on the good news, there has been a very recent Mandiant report. Mandiant, of course, is one of the important private cybersecurity firms in the United States. And it has been involved in the effort led by Dr. Greg Rattray to assist Ukraine with its cybersecurity defenses. And the Mandiant report says that in the Ukraine, the intensity and the effectiveness of attacks in recent months has been considerably less than it had been in earlier months. The attacks by Russian GRU cyber attack units have been less effective. Those same units seem to have used up their primary attack algorithms, their primary weapons, and they are turning to improvisation, primarily using the ransomware attacks that have been developed by criminal organizations against Ukraine infrastructure, against Ukraine defenses. I'm sure that Greg Rattray can give us additional information and insight on this development, but certainly the report from Mandiant is encouraging that as an actual cyber conflict takes place, attackers are attacking, defenders are defending, that the advantage is not all on the side of attackers, that defenders can learn, increase their effectiveness, and actually gain greater control of the defense of their networks. And this has certainly been the result not only of other governments assisting the very skilled Ukrainian cyber defenders, but it also has been a result of private companies from many countries assisting Ukraine. So Dr. Watanabe mentioned the catastrophic consequences of zero-day attacks, of initial attacks from an adversary on Tokyo, on Japan. But I don't think the situation is hopeless. I think that the same sort of partnerships, the same sort of technical expertise that is improving the cyber defenses of Ukraine can improve the defenses of all of us, including Japan. Another piece of good news from that same Mandiant report. The report says that the time from network breach to the detection of attack has continued to drop in recent years. 5 years ago, it was 101 days. That is over 3 months from the time that a criminal or government attacking organization would penetrate the networks of a company or a government network until that attack was detected. That time has now dropped to 16 days, which still leaves a great deal of time for extracting vital information, but it's a tremendous improvement over the virtually defenseless state of many networks 5 years ago. Also of interest is that the detection of attacks has more been due to external organizations that monitor the activity of hostile organizations, whether they be criminal or whether they be government. More detections are coming from external organizations than are coming from the internal cyber defenses of the companies being penetrated. So we clearly need both. We need companies and governments to continue to improve the defenses of their networks. And we also need government, private, international organization to penetrate the attackers and to provide notification to our own companies and government networks that are being penetrated. So the trend is positive, but there's a lot more work to do. And third, let me point to a very important initiative taken by our European allies and partners. And both Japan cyber defenders and American cyber defenders are very much in touch with our colleagues in Europe. But the European Union has just proposed a piece of legislation called the European Union Cyber Solidarity Attack. Excuse me, the European Union Cyber Solidarity Act. And this act will allocate over $1 billion for the purpose of linking up the security operations centers, both of individual countries within the EU and of multinational cyber defense networks. So we see our colleagues in Europe beginning to put together the efforts of different countries, different companies, in order to build a defensive structure which can defend all of our countries. And as we know, eventually, these international cyber defense networks must include the United States, our European like-minded countries in Asia led by Japan, including Southeast Asia, Korea, Australia, New Zealand. Eventually, we must reach this Western public-private, connected in real time cybersecurity defensive network in order to defend ourselves. So those are good news. There is some bad news. The newspapers in the United States are full of reports of very bad leaks of national security classified material made available by a very low-ranking airman from a base in Massachusetts, from an intelligence organization that on the very outside fringe of intelligence organizations. One particular airman was able to gain access to pieces of classified information that he did not have a need to know. He was able to download them, print them, take pictures of them, and then go to a private social media network that he was a member of and distribute these to many other young people who were in that same social media network. Some of those young people introduced them into other networks, and they soon came to the attention of foreign intelligence services. So even after the leaks several years ago of Edward Snowden, which caused very large efforts to try to tighten up American government networks against insiders, we see that we have not made nearly enough progress in the tools, in the procedures, both technical procedures and individual security clearance procedures to protect our information from insiders who have some access, can gain other access, and then leak that information in various forms. So a lot of work to do against the insider as well as against the outsider. Also, on the potential bad news front has been the launching of ChatGPT artificial intelligence sites, which are able to generate very realistic reports, answers to questions, pieces of prose in many languages, which are much more realistic than previous editions. We all know that phishing attacks are still the most popular way for malicious actors to gain access to networks, both private and government. And the ChatGPT tool gives phishing attackers an ability to write very realistic emails, social media posts, other kinds of messages to gain access to networks through authorized users who open those emails, open attachments, thereby providing a channel of penetration into networks. In the past, the primitive language of many phishing attacks was a key indicator of a suspicious email or communication, ChatGPT eliminates that advantage for alert network users, and we will have to deal with that. There's one other development I'd like to highlight in the region around Japan, and I'm not sure if it's good news or bad news, but as Dean Janow mentioned, the tensions in the Taiwan Strait have been high recently, and a couple of weeks ago, there was a major Chinese exercise in which they sent a large number of naval units, including their new aircraft carrier, to operate completely around Taiwan into the seas to the east, as well as north and south and in the Taiwan Strait. But there were no indications of a cyber attack or demonstration in conjunction with that pure military demonstration. Clearly, the purpose of that military demonstration was to warn Taiwan, was to demonstrate Chinese capability to Taiwan, and yet they chose not to demonstrate their cyber capability. I'm not sure if that is because they simply were holding their capability in reserve, not wanting to show any aspects of it that might allow defenses to prepare, or whether they tried to conduct some cyber attacks that would coincide with their military demonstrations, and these were stopped by Taiwan defenses. I know that Taiwan has a very effective and skilled cybersecurity system and team in place, so perhaps they were able to deal with it. But I think it's something we have to keep an eye on. We should not be lulled into complacency by this event, but we should be encouraged by Ukraine's success to be able to handle attacks should they come out. And finally, let me mention the important event of the release of the U.S. National Cybersecurity Strategy just a little over a month ago. I know that we will have an entire fireside chat later in this program about it, but let me just make a few points that I think are relevant to U.S.-Japan cybersecurity cooperation. First, there is major emphasis in the report on both public-private cooperation and on international cooperation. In fact, international partnerships are one of the 5 pillars of the strategy. And under that pillar, there are important points that will be a part of U.S. national cybersecurity strategy in the future, including leveraging international coalitions and partnerships among like-minded nations to counter threats to our digital ecosystem through joint preparedness, response, and cost imposition, working with allies and partners to make secure, reliable, and trustworthy global supply chains for information and communications technology and operational technology products and services. So these are not new policies for the United States, and U.S.-Japan cooperation has been strong in the past, but I do think that the National Cybersecurity Strategy has made an official endorsement of the importance of working with Japan as well as other partners, and it gives a direction to those on the U.S. side, and it gives authorization for even greater cooperation, which we very much need. I would point to one aspect of that. The National Cybersecurity Strategy is mostly concerned with private civilian networks. But buried within the cybersecurity strategy is a section about the defense part of this. And the National Cybersecurity Strategy says that the Department of Defense will work with intelligence partners to disrupt our enemies at scale. To disrupt our enemies at scale. And working with intelligence partners. I think this is a very important policy step the United States has taken that will allow us to join in with the cybersecurity initiatives, which Dr. Watanabe talked about, the authority that Japan now has for active defense, which includes disrupting at scale. And we now have a very good policy framework to do the important implementation work of building Japanese capability, increasing US capability, linking the two together on a real-time, at-scale basis to be able to defend the networks of both of our countries. And I think the integrity of these networks between Japan and the United States are one of the foundations of security in the Asia-Pacific region. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Admiral Blair. You've given us a lot to think about, and I can't wait to get to discussion. But first, let me invite Dr. Kanehara to add his own thoughts and reactions to both your remarks and Dr. Watanabe's. Dr. Kanehara, onegaishimasu.
Thank you very much for having me. I have nothing much to be left to speak about, but let me compliment the remarks of the previous excellent speakers. I would focus on Japan rather. The Taiwan contingency is now felt real in Japan. The general mood of insecurity is very big. So the Japanese people supporting Prime Minister Kishida's very bold efforts to build up our self-defense forces and doubling the national defense budget. Japan is pivotal. Japan is indispensable for US operations in Asia. There are legal framework here. I have to say 1960, Prime Minister Kishi agreed with President Eisenhower to let Americans use Japanese bases to protect Korea, Taiwan, and the Philippines, ex-Japanese imperial territory and ex-US territory, because there were power vacuum there. So Americans said, we need to use Japanese bases, but we want to protect the outer space of Japan's territory. We agreed. This is one. 1999, Prime Minister Obuchi agreed with President Clinton. If there's the Second Korean War, Japan would help Americans in non-combat operations outside Japan. And 2015, Prime Minister Abe said, no, to deter the enemies, possible enemies, we have to join the combat operation from the outset. This is the collective self-defense arguments, and Prime Minister prevailed. So this is where we are. But I have to say, the cybersecurity is the very weak point of Japan's defense posture. I have to say, if the blackout happens in Japan, if enemies succeed in destroying our power grid or telecommunication system, Japan will be blackouted. And then the running water, there's no running water because there's no electricity. All the facilities in the roads, railways, and the airports, ports would be paralyzed. Then how the US forces can fight? So the cybersecurity is an urgent necessity for us to strengthen. And beyond that, we have to cooperate with the allies, including, of course, the principal ally, the United States, cyber intelligence, and cyber attack. For that purpose, Japan has to go through many difficult, heavy weightlifting homeworks. I have to say, one, our cyber army is now roughly 500, 600, 700. This is a sesame. We have to expand this, and our government is now going forward to increase this cyber army to several thousand, possibly 4,000 or 5,000, and with the 10 or 15,000 engineers, we have to create a cyber center with a supercomputer with the widespread network of sensors in Japan, and we have to realize the cyberspace situation awareness. And this is absolute must. We have to do this in the first place. And then we have to give the cyber army a legal authority to penetrate into enemies' systems. So now in Japan, it is stupid, but our law prohibits our cyber army to hack back. And this is not the cyber army. We have to give a legal authority for them to break their code. And they break their codes in listening, but they cannot break the code in cyberspace. And this is a stupid law. We have to change it. The third is the Japan's cyber. We have to create a cybersecurity bureau in the Prime Minister's office in charge of cybersecurity of the government and the critical infrastructure, simply because our forces are not allowed to protect beyond its military domain. They can't protect infrastructure. They can't protect the government itself. And so we have to create a cybersecurity director in the Prime Minister's office. And we have to give the cyber army second cap under Prime Minister's instruction. Then they can be legally authorized to protect the government and the critical infrastructure. And this is absolute necessity. And by doing so, we can break a very heavy stovepiping between the inter-military community and civilian agencies. This stovepipe is huge in Japan. We have not yet succeeded in breaking this wall. It's only Prime Minister's office who can break down this stovepiping. And we have to do this. Data agency and the Defense Ministry, Foreign Ministry, Police Agency. These agencies must cooperate with each other. Otherwise, we can never be successful. And next point is we have to create a government cloud. We don't have this. With cybersecurity, what we should protect? We need to create a cloud system in which we have to put the government, the military industry, and then the telecommunication industry, and some the networking system engineers. Then we have to make a robust government cloud. We need somewhere to free, like Amazon Web Service, like Ukrainians did. In case of attack, we have to free somewhere. Then we have to use some other possible clouds like Amazon or something else. And then we have to put a big firewall here, very strong firewall. And so maybe I don't think our companies can do this. We have to ask help of American big networking companies like GAFA. And then if we have a big firewall, what is necessary next is we have to have a very good clearance system, because firewall is powerless vis-a-vis the insiders like Snowden, like the Donbas Debushka or the airman from the States. I don't know who he is, but the insiders can easily break the firewall from inside. We don't have this. The minister Takaichi is working on this, and we have to do this job. And then we have to have a good cybersecurity or even quantum research center, because the technology is very in flux. We can't set the standard here because the standard is going up every day. Now ChatGPT is coming in. We have to catch up with the technology. We have money. We have engineers. We have very good supercomputers. We don't have policy here. We need to create a cyber research center where we have to incorporate the AI or supercomputing or top-notch chips. We have to do this. Finally, I have to emphasize here, we have to strengthen our silo. Silo is Cabinet Intelligence and Research Office. This is not equivalent with Admiral Blair's office. It's very different. It's very, very different. It's very weak, very, very weak. We have to make a robust inter-system here, and we have to connect the Cybersecurity Bureau and the Intel Bureau. And then we have something to trade with the allies. Now we can't be a part of these Five Eyes members simply because we have nothing to trade, nothing to trade. So to be a member, we have to be able to recollect our own tradecrafts. And for that purpose, CYRO and the newly created Cybersecurity Office must cooperate each other inside the Prime Minister's office. These are my points. Thank you very much.